All right, Fortnite has added the shock rocks, as you can see Pixie using right now, and it has changed the meta quite a lot. There's a lot of different ways that players are using these. So I want to jump into Pixie and Swizzy, who ended up winning the most recent Divisional Cup, to show you how you're using them and how it's totally changed the Storm meta and just the generally rotation meta. All right, so if you watch any of my videos, you'll already know what the main meta has been and why mid-map POIs are so good. I'm going to explain it extremely quickly for people who don't know, but you'll see in this game, Pixie and Swizzy here, for example, if I scroll forward, zone pulls in here. Now, this is the third zone has just appeared. And as you notice, this is the point where they stay inside. They go into the storm. And then if you go all the way back here, you'll see that, they stay in storm really deep here. And then the next zone pulls. And it pulls back to them. And they are deep in this side. And they can play the storm all the way, which means that they can basically get into the side, which is here's the dead side, where there's way less players. Fun enough, because there's so many people doing this, right? This here would be the congested side, because there's a lot of players who didn't play the storm. But there's actually been so many other teams who are doing this strat. There's just still quite a few teams around them. But of course, basically the main benefit here is that for like 2 zones, you can kind of just stay away from people and not get tagged for any damage by playing the storm. And then you also have the opportunity to go here, right? So as you can see, this is maybe a better example. You get into dead side here where there's no one, less people, gives you easier rotates to every other zone. That's the theory. That's what people are doing basically all year. The big flaw with this is, of course, storm sickness. You can only take 600 damage in total to the storm before you actually start getting inflicted and then start taking damage. So I have a nifty calculator I actually made here to kind of show you why the specific timings on this are so good. So as we noticed, by the end of the second zone here, right? So I put enter the zone in the third zone here and then leave the zone in the 5th zone. You'll notice the number particular is 525. So basically, if they enter when the 3rd zone appears and then when the 5th zone is over, so basically when the 6th zone appears, they'll take 525 storm damage total, which means they have 75 damage left to play with to play storm in the end game. That's pretty much basically what they did here. As you notice, storm pops up into the 3rd. They're here in this first game, and then they're basically in storm there until the end, basically the very end of the 5th zone. So in this particular match, which was game number 1 of this tournament, this is like the old meta, air quotes, that I'm just showing you. And you can see it basically leaves you with 75 storm damage roughly. That's only 7 or 8 seconds in endgame though, which really is not that much time. So this basically right here, what I'm highlighting is the old meta in air quotes. And I'm going to come back to this later, but I just want you to really keep in mind this like 525 and like 75 damage left, as it will become quite relevant later on. Alrighty, so they're landing Battlewood Boulevards. And of course, as we already know, I've kind of shown you from that already, this is somewhat close to the center of the map. Of course, one of the problems that if you're, say, for example, Lefty Lodge, Wonky Team, all these kind of things, is that if you pull a far zone, you will take storm damage earlier. So of course, this kind of 525 number is basically not really possible. You can't tank storm in the same kind of way. What a lot of teams do is rotate out very early and then have to go back. It's a whole pain. Right now, of course, with them landing Battlewoods, it's close enough to the middle map. Talked about this a lot. Chest number 1, Pixie manages to get the shock rocks already. Now, because there's actually a team contesting them, they basically just get together. Let me just skip forward a bit. They essentially just get together, pop one, and then can use the triple jump to just entirely flank right over the back of them. It doesn't actually make a huge amount of difference, like in the way that this fight actually started off. But you'll notice they very quickly are able to jump onto Isaf here, who's only got 9 builds, right? Kind of just complete shock right off the rip. And he's just getting 1v2 down in the basement. Very little awkward spot to fight. Continually getting a bunch of toe shots on. His teammates also trying to get back to him and run around. But you can kind of see like the huge disparity in loot, right? Like 30 builds, 28 in comparison to like 10 and now 2 from Isaf. So because they're able to use the shock rocks to get onto them and to fight them really fast, they just immediately have the advantage. So he's of course been a little goat. He doesn't even kill. I thought he was going to get the goat. Managed to get the second elim. Yeah, so they basically just wipe the team off spawn straight away just by flying straight onto their head. Slightly less relevant, but also equally as important note is that the Lancehead pistol will make a return this game. If you've watched my previous video, you'll know that everyone's just going to use it and macro it because it's not automatic. So they're going to make it automatic because it's the highest DPS in the game. So you will notice in this match, Swizzy's not the only one. All of a sudden, there's a massive uptick in people using this weapon. What a surprise. Who would have thought? Me and literally everyone else. So after looting, they have tons of gold. Tons and tons. You can't just see how much, but both of them have tons of gold. The Pixie gets a bunch of the medkits that he's been carrying back and chucks them onto this south building here. I can't remember if they just bought all of it. Yeah, I think they just bought more here. They've been kind of juggling them as they go. Pixie, my god, can you please throw this so I can continue this commentary? Buys 3 chug jugs and then also throws them into this exact same building as well. You'll notice here on the roof, kind of stacked with heals already off the rip. He also has 2 more, as you can see in the inventory. And then also Swizzy found one as well. So they have, what, 5 chug jugs off the rip, and then also 2 stacks of medkits going onto that roof as well. Now you can also see here that Swizzy just purchased 2 of the shock rocks as well. I don't think it's enough gold to buy like full 4 stack, however. He's also got 2 of them here. That 2 now he's going to chop into the roof of this building. And then they're going to create basically a little spot for all of their heals to go. Like, this is kind of insane. Leaving everything behind here, all of the medkits, all of the chug jugs, all of the extra mobility items. And there's the medkits very nicely falling down as I say that, which again, they will come back to later on. I mean, this spot is so insane. The fact that Pixie, like, I was going to say still has enough gold to go and buy other stuff. He didn't actually end up having more gold there. But again, because they wiped the team off spawn, they have some early surge. Then they also have, like, nobody looting the entire of this POI, which gives them so much gold, which just gives them the ability to buy all of these, of course, chug jugs, medkits, and rotation options too from the mending machines. Okay, now back to the surge strategy. As we all know from this position, this is kind of similar to the first match that I showed you on Assyrian earlier, where at this point, right, this is where they allowed the storm to take them, and so they could run away. However, if you actually notice, what they do here is absolutely not that whatsoever. Is that they actually leave the POI. They have this room with all of the extra heals, as we've kind of already shown, and you'll see that they end up just running away. So leaving all of that behind and just running away to the zone. You'll see now, the next zone is kind of south to them here, and they've just basically tarped in, gotten all this brick from, you know, just in this small spot, just so they don't waste anything. And then they just like sit here entirely AFK. Like, they got here at 9:19, and I'm just going to skip forward. So you can see now it's almost 2 minutes later, and they've literally sat in this box and done nothing. That's of course because they're just waiting now until the 4th zone. So this is after the 4th zone wait, and this is about to be when the 4th zone shrink pops up. And as you notice, when I start to skip forward, the zone then cuts them in, and then they run back into Battlewood. So rather than doing what they did in the first game, and what a lot of the other teams are doing, is that they start tanking Storm somewhere near the start of the 3rd zone. Instead, if I change this to a 4, and then change this to shrink, you'll see that they now actually only take 305 Storm damage, and, you know, as they're only taking like a zone and a half, basically, worth of actual Storm. You see now that they take 305 Storm damage, which means they have 295 Storm damage left before they get Storm Sickness, as they're only taking like a zone and a half, right? This 4th zone shrink, and then of course also they have like the 5th zone wait and shrink as well. So you'll see they run back to that big box of heals that they had. Now, I will say, obviously, they're very aware that someone could camp on them here. This is very counterable. Like, I imagine after this week, whether I'd made this video or not, like, people would obviously just figure this out and see what they're doing and wait for them to leave and then just grab all of the loot, because it's just going to be in the same spot almost every single time. But now you finally see, again, the shock rocks have been picked up. So basically now they can play the heals. Swizzy's using one of the chugs because they have a bunch of extra ones, so they just might as well. Pixie starts popping one of the medkits. He can carry a lot of the rest as well. So that means that he's got the shock rocks in his inventory now, which is just about to drop in a second, as we'll see. And someone actually rotating past. I actually just saw some footprints there. He's wondering if they're camping on the mending machine, but they're actually not at all. But now it's also the 5th zone. So 5th zone is actually pulled to them, right? So from this situation, because they've only taken a very minimal amount of storm damage, even if they pulled a full max zone down here, they still would have the time and the heals to rotate all the way towards it. But, you know, luckily in this instance, they do pull a relatively close one. So they still can basically do whatever they want with these heals. I did just miss it, but Pixie did just pop one of the shock rocks. So, of course, him and Swizzy now both have the triple jump effect. Now it is time to go. So, importantly, what they're carrying here is you see that Swizzy and Pixie now both have overdrive grenades. So, they do not actually carry the shock rocks later into the match, as we'll see. There's quite a good reason for that later. And Pixie, because they still have gold left, he's making sure he's capped, right? So this is really, really important for the way that they play this. And now they also have an extra grenade here so that they can actually make a rotate. They actually kind of fumbled this entirely, but they can still rotate through the storm here. Now they should be almost the most northern team. It's funny, Kami and Hari is actually still behind them, but they've been able to play the storm for the longest because they've taken the least storm damage and of course had the most heals left behind. Zip up here, very lucky. There's like a random extra med kit here that they just found. Super convenient, but it doesn't really matter too much. It just means that they didn't have to pop like 100 of the chug. So they've just naded once more, and now at this point is when they can triple jump in. So if there's anyone like camping at the edge of storm here, like say if you were someone in this, or if you're in these boxes or whatever, you know, you're probably going to be looking towards teams who are nading, and that nade effect is really loud, right? The audio is very obvious. So you can turn around and hold them. But in this instance, they can just use the triple jump to get in and to land straight into zone. And now because the zone actually pulls over to this side, right? They have the option then just to rotate straight down again or go in any this way. They actually timed it exactly when the zone popped up, so they could figure out like the best spot to land if possible. Now, of course, they heal. They've got the extra med kit, and they just use one of the chug jugs to heal up. So after this strat, right, they've got 160 chug, a 200 chug, 5 nades, 6 nades. That medkit's about to be gone, and a full chug jug left as well. But what's very important for how they play their end games is that they've only taken 305 storm damage, whereas most other teams in this exact like same scenario, they might have done something like this, as we already know, which is like 525. So they can't really play the storm that much in the end game whatsoever. Now, because they have so many nades, actually, before I say that, Swizzy gets a nice little hill here, waiting on Telechus, absolute max damage. Wish you could see the damage, but replay mode is absolutely bugged. Teammates there. They get a nice refresh before moving. They already had a ton of nades, but now they've got even more. So they're like super capped again. And what this means is they don't have to use those like risky slides. They can just continue like nade box, nade box, nade box. I'm saying this well knowing that Swizzy's about to almost die and go down to 1 HP on this rotate. I didn't see how he did it when I watched back through taking some of the notes. So the nade here, Insta just gets beamed. And then gets beamed again. So lucky he survives this, by the way. Look at the HP. If this is me at this point, I'm screaming like, oh, I'm dead, I'm dead, I'm dead, it's over. Lucky they stopped building, did a nice little defensive box fight. Pixie did a good job creating a bunch of space so that they stop spraying, and then he can get healed up. And that's why having a million chug jugs is so useful. Nice little kill on Twine in the backside, who was weak. Don't think they're actually able to get a huge amount of loot for it. Nope, not greeting it, but here they can take a little storm, right? That was like 15 damage to storm. Doesn't really matter. Rax is boxed up next to him. He managed to get yet another elim from that too, so that's another refresh onto his materials here. They're doing a really good job of actually just getting a bunch of elims before moving zones. I feel like one of the things that these teams really struggle with, I mean, in most of the tournaments I've not seen them do well, is just they just don't frag whatsoever. But this tournament in particular, they had a lot of eliminations, which is great. They also just didn't play height, which you'll see in endgame as well. I mean, I don't think they played it every game, or didn't play every game. I've not watched every single match, but a lot of the times I saw these teams play historically, like, I don't know, their mid and low ground wasn't particularly that good, but in this game, at least, it very much so was. So now again, they have cap nades again. I mean, even if they didn't get those refreshes, they still would have had a ton. And this means that in endgame, they can be, like I said, relatively safe with them here. So they're kind of the last team to rotate now. Zone pops. Swizzy nades both of them together. And then they don't have to do like a super risky ton of slides. They can just, you know, one little slide jump, box, get back together. All right, so they nade again. Something similar. A lot of the times in these scenarios, right, in these kind of like 8 zones, 6 zones, when you're not in like a super great spot, it's really common for players to get split, right? As you can see, they're not really in the same box, so they're kind of close to each other. In this scenarios, this is what's so good about having so many nades at this point, right? Obviously, they kept the nades left because they ended up using some of the super jump from the shock rocks earlier in that rotate. And of course, they got good refreshes, so it slightly doesn't matter too much. But now they can just kind of rotate individually and then make sure they get back together at the end of the moving zone. All right, so they made a nice early rotate right here into the 8th zone. And as you notice, 5 seconds left, and this is now where it's very important that they didn't take the storm damage earlier. Zone starts to pull to their west, so they kind of tarped in a little bit, as you can see here. So they're kind of in this green mark here, and the zone ends up pulling this direction. The zone pulled from this way, so it's coming in and then to the right. However, now because they do not take as much storm damage, now they can play storm in endgame, hence with all the chugs that they have earlier. So they nade, push themselves into the storm. This is kind of like north side, as you can see here. Like, so they've naded from here up, and now because again they have so many nades left, they can nade in this direction as well. You can see they can sit and then play the chugs. Unfortunately, they did actually get spotted there, so the play kind of got ruined a little bit, but they've also now just been able to get straight to the edge, and they're also now on expanding side. Shout out to the TS Classic, expanding my brain onto expanding side knowledge here. But being on this side of the zone, when it opens up this way, from their current position here, if I zoom out here and kind of look towards where the zone would be, the zone is going to continually open up, right? It's opening up over on this way. Whereas if they're on the other side, if they're on here, the zone is continually closing. So if they're tarping forward, for example, here, they're getting pushed this direction by the storm. Whereas over here, if they're kind of tarping forward, they can tarp forward and to the right and diagonally in, and the storm is opening, so it gives them a lot more time. Or they can just wait here, and then as the zone opens up, a lot of these players here, if I kind of zoom out up to the top view here, you'll see that all of these players are kind of go this way, but there's just a lot of open space here for them to kind of nade forward if they need to. Whereas if you're like sky jump, your nade is going to put you into everyone else. Whereas if you're on this side here, you're going to be able to go up into, I mean, away freely from everyone else. I can't remember how they rotate this. I do want to watch. They can sit and play their chug. And again, like, they still have 6 nades. It's 9th. So does anyone else have anywhere near these amount of nades? Like, if I just kind of scroll through, almost everyone. Casper has 3 nades to himself. 1. Skyjump has 4. 2. None. Some shock rocks. Barely any. Chino does. Chino and Pablo have, Jesus, they have tons. It seems like they've just been fragging based on how many mats they still have and stuff. So obviously there's a lot of people who do still have nades left, but outside of Pablo and Chino, I think they basically have the most nades still left in the lobby. Now you can see here, because they're at the expanding side, look how free this nade is, right? Sure, there's one team there, but they can just kind of jump off over their head. Absolutely no problem whatsoever. And now, yet again, they can tank the storm, right? That was 40 damage that Pixie just took just on that one little bit to claim front there. And remember, had he taken Storm earlier, he only would have 75 to work with. So he wouldn't have been able to tank Storm at the start of this moving zone, and then he wouldn't have been able to tank it here either. Well, he probably would have just been able to do that alone. But that like entire rotate that they've just managed to do there would not have been possible had they played the old meta instead of like running back in and not taking Storm into the 4th zone. Also here, just a beautiful play. Look at this. Walls claimed. Deemer's Darm. I mean, just... kind of looked like Darm was just running into the dead body and couldn't get past there. But look how quick they just wiped them off their lair. Great synergy. I've not seen Swizzy and Pixie play like low and mid like this and like so efficiently and so well and so long. Unfortunately, it does kind of get them stuck behind now, as you can see. And I think Swizzy does end up dying at this point. It doesn't end up being... No, it's not this point. It's way later. Sorry, take it back. Look at what they're doing now. Ignore me. All right, totally ignore what I said. That is not true at all. They're now in an awkward situation after getting those 2 refreshes, as you can see, right? If I like zoom up, they were scouting on which way they could go there, and there's really nowhere. They're just blocked. They're right at the back. They got 2 really nice refreshes, but like this is basically the worst spot you could be in, right? Way at the back. Where do you go from here? How do you get out? How do you rotate? Well, take a guess. They still have Chug Jugs, right? They've got tons from those refreshes, and they still had some earlier because they've done a good job not taking damage. So they can play the Storm again. This allows them to then actually find a spot, right? They can kind of mantle their way, or not mantle, they can kind of climb their way up, get themselves a nice good spot. And again, because they still have overdrive grenades, because of how much they saved earlier, they can now just overdrive to the front side into a nice, good lair. And now, like, look how many mats they have still. We're in 11th zone, 50 and 37 builds total. Like, there's absolutely no chance anyone else has anywhere close to those amount of materials. Obviously, good refreshes, good rotates. Cut off into the Storm has meant that, of course, they use less materials on those rotates because they can just use the overdrive grenades. And then I do think they absolutely milk, if I remember correctly here. I could be wrong. Are they about to rotate and they just get jumped in on? Yeah. Unfortunately, Switchy just the full jumped in on right at the back. Pixie almost dies. He gets left as a solo and then, you know, does a good job trying to survive as much as he can, but unfortunately also dies as well. So you might not think, well, the Shock Rocks didn't really sound like they did all that much in this game, but if you remember correctly, they right off the rip were able to use them to jump onto the team contesting them, which gave them the early Storm Surge damage, which enables this entire strategy. You can't do this strategy if you don't actually get like a ton of damage way before this. And it also meant that here, right, for example, they've saved more shockwave grenades because they probably did 1 or 2 more in this instance to get into the zone, and had their teams been holding them and waiting, they would have heard that as well. So it wasn't like the hugest change, the hugest impact. As I'm realizing this, it did make a difference, but it wasn't like crazy because it obviously gives them like free mobility they don't actually have to carry inside of their inventory. So I want to look into how other teams are doing it. Teeny dies here, for example, whilst having the shock rock effect activated, and you can triple jump as a dead body. Now, had he been able to get the revive off, that would have been insane, but unfortunately, Shark ends up dying. He dies out the sky too. But good knowledge that if you use those, you can just run away from people as a knock body. I'm sure that's probably going to get patched, I would imagine. So in terms of how to actually use it in the end game, if you got here, you can see Novatism has 4 left, and Waza still has 3 nades as well. You just throw one down, give both you and the teammate it, and then you just wait for zone to catch up, and you can just literally triple jump like this, like the entire one movement. Now, they do a good job of, like, landing in a high layer here. But one thing, obviously, you want to be careful is there's players jumping through the bottom of your tarp, so you don't want to be too close to any other players. It just gives you a nice little, pretty much one entire free rotate. If you notice here, was I guess pre-edited and insta-killed. But this is kind of actually more where the nades are super useful, right? As a solo, look, he's at backside, an awkward spot, and you can just double jump over the entire lobby. Because you're kind of staying close to everyone, right? Like, you're not jumping way up in the sky. It's so hard to actually hit you as you're using it like that. And of course, he had 4 in the inventory, so that's like 3 full jumps, but you don't have to use 3 jumps on every rotate. There, he just used 2. So he had a spare one left. He ended up actually like popping another rock there before the next rotate. But you'll notice, I think this next rotate he does right here, he's again in an awkward spot backside, and you can just do another double jump. Unfortunately, he did, I think, either run out of jumps. He still has like cones on him. I think it's because he accidentally mantled there or whatever. But now he still has 2 more charges of it left. Like, you can use it just to jump in one single rotate. So really, by having 4 in your inventory, you're still getting 12 jumps, which in the end game, when you're like solo clutching, this is so good. But obviously, you can also like jump as a duo as well. You don't need to necessarily just use this as a solo too. There, jump straight to front in a way that, like, if you used an overdrive grenade, there's no way you'd have that much control because you just fly into the front side of the zone. Obviously, you also have the ability to like break through builds if you're in a really awkward spot, which I think he does a little bit later in this too. He's now backside, pops it, jumps again up to the front side here. Like, as a solo clutch item, that's so good. And he jumps in an odd spot. Someone's there. He needs to get out, so he just jumps up. Unfortunately, doesn't really work because he jumps into a full other duo. But Still a lot of application used in endgame. A really good item. Most of the time, what I've been seeing so far is either a team carrying like one guy with overdrive grenades and one guy with those, or we've seen it in Swizzy Pixie's case here. Of course, he was carrying, they're both just carrying them, but they used them earlier in the game to make sure they just had charges for one single rotate. So one thing I was yet to consider with these is how much distance you can travel if you have multiple of them. You can see Teeny here ends up hearing a reboot next to him, and he just does a single triple jump. And then whilst it just, well, I was gonna say in the air, as soon as he lands, it's another triple jump, and he's just gone, what, like 200 plus 300 meters in the matter of like not milliseconds, that might be a slight exaggeration, seconds. Now he's obviously like straight into the fight, pressure on Janice. Janice is weak on HP. They can catch up real quick, and then manages to get the elim here. So big meta switch ups, definitely worth carrying. I'm still not sure what the actual best way to carry them is. If you want to use one person with them, one person with overdrive. Of course, as we just saw, Swizzy Pixie had a lot of success just by using them early into the game, not necessarily carrying them much into the end game. A lot of the teams have had a lot of success using them into the end game. So TBC on that. Like the video, subscribe. Peace.